Thank you. I decided not to use the Oprah Winfrey microphone. I don't do well with that. So, see. How is everybody doing tonight? I'm so happy. I'm so honored to be here. You know, every time I think about my life at BC, there are so many people at BC, and anybody could have been chosen to share their faith journey with you. But this is actually the second time I've done Agape Latte. So when I got invited, I tried my diplomacy and negotiating skills trying to get out of this, and I failed completely. So I'm really very, very honored to be here. So I'm going to share my faith journey with you, and it's going to be based on faith, gratitude, and how participation and belonging all fall within my faith journey. So there are going to be 3 parts. The first part, I'll tell you a little bit about growing up in Ghana and also a story with my mom that kind of reawakened my whole faith journey. Then the second part is going to be how this journey of faith and hope and belonging and gratitude have shaped my work here at BC. Because I know that without everything that I mentioned, nothing at BC is going to be meaningful. Then the third part of the conversation today, I'll talk about 2 tragic events that shook my faith, that got me to talk to God in a way that I've never done in my life. And also how these 2 misfortunes brought me back to where I am today. So let's start with the first part. I always have to remind people that when you want to learn about my life, you're going to hear about the Brothers of the Holy Cross. So the Brothers of the Holy Cross from Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame used to be one of our rivals in football, right? But that's okay. These brothers left here meaning the United States. They left the comfort of their lives in the United States, and they came to Ghana and founded several schools, and I went to one of those schools. And I'll tell you why this is so significant in my life. And this may sound even stranger to everyone. When I was growing up in Ghana, not everybody went to high school. Like my hometown and maybe 100 other hometowns didn't have high schools. You had to travel far and wide to go to a high school. And I know this sounds very strange. So in my middle school in my hometown, 5 of us went to high school. 4 of them had their parents living abroad. So their parents were either living in England or in the United States, so they could afford to send their children to high school. I don't come from a rich family, but I come from a family where the richness was found in faith and religion. So one thing that I did as a young boy, I was a young boy, I feel so old, I forgot that I was a young boy. So I spent a lot of time with priests when they came to my hometown. When I was growing up, priests came to your hometown maybe every 6 months. So think about, receiving a communion and it didn't happen for us that often. But one thing that was so amazing about my growing up was that my dad and my mom were the ones in charge of the Catholic Church in my hometown. So when the priests came, and a lot of these priests came from Holland or from Ireland, I had a privilege to be so close to the priest. And my mom always teased me saying that, you want to be with this priest because they always eat chicken. Now, growing up in Ghana, chicken was a big deal. So when the priest came around and I was with them, I did eat chicken, but that wasn't the main reason why I did that. So one day, I went with one of the priests to the cathedral in my district. So he went to his meetings. I had no idea what he was doing. Then I walked around the cathedral and I saw this person dressed in white And then I walked to him. I was an altar boy. And one of the Latin phrases that I learned was Dominus vobiscum, which means, may the Lord be with you or something. So I walked to Brother Raymond, and then I spoke the Latin, thinking that he knew what I was talking about. One of the reasons why I did that was that I saw that he had a car, and I really wanted to get inside that car so that he would take me around the city. But to end this story in a very, very happy mood, this brother was the principal of the high school that was 150 miles away from my hometown. So he encouraged me to apply to go to the high school, and I did go 150 miles. 7 years, I didn't come home every day. I came home maybe every 3 or 4 months. And the reason why this part is such an amazing part of my story is that without this opportunity, I wouldn't be standing here. And without the brothers, I wouldn't be doing anything that I've done in my life. Get a little bit of right here. So these brothers, of course, they taught us what we were supposed to know in high school. But they taught me how to dress sores. At the end of the evening, you go to the infirmary. I was actually the chief infirmarian. And I love just taking care of people, dressing their sores, and just doing things that nobody wanted us to do. The brothers also told us that we belonged everywhere on this planet. They insisted on us believing that. I think at 13 years, when somebody tells you you belong wherever you go, it's so hard to believe it. Here were these brothers who had left Notre Dame, South Bend, to come to Ghana, and they were taking care of me and maybe 350 other crazy boys. And they loved what they did. They were not black people. They were human beings who were in Ghana taking care of us. And the other thing that they told us was that nothing in this world is free. The air that you breathe, you think is free. And everything that you think is free, you need to learn how to pay God back. So one of the things that we did in my high school, we did a lot of community work. Anything you did something that didn't indicate you paying God back, the brothers will find a way to remind you about that. So here am I, didn't think I was going to make it to high school because there was no way I was going to do it. My bravery and my one sentence in Latin, the Dominus vobiscum, up to this point, when I get an email from Brother Raymond, he's teasing me because that was the term that I used. Of course, I also thought that he was a priest, and then he told me that he was a brother. Like, no, you don't look like my brother. I mean, you look so different, but I didn't even know the difference between a brother and a priest. So I'm just going to fast forward this and let you know that I'm standing here. I'm doing great. I'm doing great work, and it's God's work because of the impact that these brothers had on me. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit. I go to college. I'm studying French and Spanish, and it's not just the languages that you're studying. You study the philosophy, you study the culture. And I had this great opportunity to read Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre. They talk about existentialism. They talk about how you don't need God in your life. That you as a human being have so many pieces of strength. You can do everything on your own. I love that because I knew I was going to go home for the first time after college and play this tune to my mom. I just couldn't wait to go home and practice my non-existence of God to make sure that my mom would believe that. So I go home that Sunday. I'm sleeping in, minding my own business, and then I heard a knock on my door. I'm like, who is this? I knew it was my mom, of course. It's like, yeah, do you know today is Sunday? And I said, of course, I know today is Sunday. And my mom said, do you know you're going to be late for Mass if you don't get up? And I told my mom, I'm not getting up for Mass. And she wanted to know why. And I said, I learned at the university that God doesn't exist. And my mom said, "You are losing your mind." My mom told me everything that my mom has never, I mean, she wasn't that nasty, but she basically said, if you don't get out of that bed in 10 minutes and get ready for Mass, you can imagine whatever she, I don't think I've ever gotten ready for anything within 10 minutes except for that time. My mom she's home with God now, the most gentle person that I think God created. And I have to tell you, my mom also loved the church so much. When I graduated from high school, the first place that I worked was at a Muslim high school in Kumasi, which is the second largest town in my hometown, in my home country. I was in charge of the Catholic students in that high school. So 1982 was when Pope John Paul II came to Ghana. And I had this great opportunity to take my Catholic high school students to go meet the Pope with other people. Then that same evening, I went home, I got my mom. I brought him to where you were living because I was teaching in that high school. And the next day, we went to the big stadium to see the Pope. So this is my colleague Erin, where you are sitting. This is the Pope, and this is me and my mom. And my mom is almost like having a hard time believing that she was this close to the Pope. And I almost said, "You need to calm down, I can't do CPR." But because of this connection, my mom was so proud of me because her little son was the one who made it possible for her to encounter the Pope without even going to Rome. My mom actually passed away the day after Pope John Paul II died, and we still believe the Pope needed my mom in heaven. So he came and then he deprived us of our mom. I went to Mass. I had no choice. And every time I think about this encounter, I'm so grateful for whatever took my mom the courage, first of all, to tell me that I was losing my mind, because I was losing my mind. I only read like 3 pages of philosophy, and I convinced myself that God didn't exist. That is not true. So after I got over this, and we went to church, and we did a lot of community work, my mind also went back to the brothers of Notre Dame, everything that they taught us about serving God, belonging, and doing everything for humanity. So that's going to be the end of our part 1 here. The second part of my story or my faith journey is going to talk about my work here at BC. But before I talk about BC, let me talk about how I got here. I worked at Northeastern University for 3 years. Northeastern brought me from New Orleans to Boston. And when the job here at BC opened up, I applied. But I never told anybody at Northeastern because I knew they were going to be so upset to see me leave. I'm not kidding you. So I said, I'm going to do whatever I need to do and then let God take it from there. So when BC was getting close to offering me the job, when Northeastern was getting close to offering me the job, they called BC. And then Northeastern people found out that I might be leaving. So I showed up at work the next day. So this is the reference desk, which is my area in the library. Then the library director was sitting there waiting for me. I saw him and I said, "Oh my God, I think they found out what's going on." So he took me to his office and for almost 4 hours talked me out of coming to BC. Like, "You can't abandon us. Everybody's going to miss you. You've done so much. We really need to continue with your work, and I don't want you to go." So after those few hours, I said, he's right. Nobody has even told me how much they appreciated all my gifts and talents and everything. So I'll go back to my office. I typed a note, And I said, to BC, I said, I'm so sorry, I'm not going to be able to accept this position. And those of you who don't know, in the olden days, when you wrote a letter, you made a pilgrimage to the mailbox or you went to the post office. So I came this close to the mailbox, and I had that letter that I was going to send to BC telling them I was not going to come. And I think God said, don't drop that letter into that box. Go to BC and then give it a try. So that was 32 years ago. I didn't put the letter into the mailbox. I decided to come to BC. And I have to tell you, those 32 years have been incredible in my life. And I say this to everyone, if you know me, there's never been a time when I've gotten up and not wanting to come to work at BC. But I'll tell you how my faith and my belonging and also my gratitude are part of the work that I do at BC. I'll just give you a list of some of the things. I had to make a list for myself so that I don't forget. It's not a very, very long list. So this is what I do here at BC, some of what I do. I'm getting there. I have a shorter. So I have first year experience, which a lot of you came through, right? First year experience is the orientation during the summer. I have first year writing seminar. I do the Woods College of Advancing Studies. We've become part of Messina, which is part of BC. I've also done the service trips that you mentioned in the introduction. I've done retreats such as Halftime, and we've used the 3 key questions Father Hans poses to us, and also my participation in the ministry work here at BC. Why is this such an important part of the work I do here? I'm just going to pick one or two. If you didn't know, Boston College employs over 3,500 people. So the city of Newton has a lot of us working for this city here. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is this. Out of the 3,500 people doing orientation, I'm one of the very few people who get the opportunity to welcome students. You may think this is not a big thing, but every time I'm doing that, my mind goes back to my Holy Cross High School. When we came from far away, when we came from different places, we were so confused. And I'm not saying people are confused. When I'm standing in front of freshmen and all the new members of our community, I know what people are going through. And once I'm there in front of the multitude, sometimes I don't even know what I'm going to say to them. But I know at that very particular moment, they are the most important people in my life right there at BC. I know that when a freshman is thinking about courses and everything, they're also thinking about, do I belong here at BC? And what has that got to do with my faith and everything? Going back to the Brothers of Notre Dame, going back to the work we need to do to welcome people. When I'm in front of you guys, I am in awe, I'm in gratitude, and I ask God, I ask the Holy Spirit for wisdom. A lot of times people will ask me, what are you going to say at orientation? To be honest with you, I talk about the library things, but the extra words that come out of me, it's all coming through the power of God and through the power of the Holy Spirit. So that's one part of it. Fortunately, we get to see many of you, you are not freshmen, and not everybody here is, during the first year writing seminar. You guys remember FWS? So part of my work is first year writing seminar. What has this got to do with my faith and my gratitude and everything? I'll talk about a little ritual that I do. We have a library classroom, and to get into that classroom, you need to put in a code. When I'm putting in that code to get to room 307 in the library, I'm saying a prayer. I'm praying to God to humble me and also to remind me that the classroom is always going to be a sacred place for me. So before I enter the classroom, I mean, I'm not saying this for everybody to hear in the library. I'm praying to God, and I almost want to take off my shoes the way you do it in Ghana, because I'm entering holy ground. I'm entering a space where I'm going to be able to learn from students and also to teach them. And it has everything to do with my faith, with my gratitude, and the fact that my strength always is coming from something that is higher than me. So we could talk about halftime and everything, but I just wanted to use those two as an example to show you how faith and gratitude plays into my work. So the next thing that I want to talk about, I think everything has been joyful so far. I'm going to share two things that have not been very, very joyful for me. So my older brother lives in Minneapolis. My older brother is the kindest person you ever encounter. You show up in Minneapolis, you don't have a place to stay. My brother Kofi will give you a place to stay. You don't have food. I think it's the way we all started at home. My mom always cooked so much food. And sometimes she told us that she was keeping food for ghosts. And in Ghana, you are terrified of ghosts. We found out that the ghosts were children in the neighborhood who didn't have food. And the reason why my mom always used the ghost thing was, if you ate ghost food, you're going to go to ghost land. But my mom used that trick to feed children in the neighborhood. Where am I going with this? We picked that up. My brother picked that up. So my brother goes with his wife to Ghana on their vacation, and he wakes up one day and he couldn't stand on his feet. Every time he tries to stand straight, he falls down. So the wife took him to the hospital. They gave him antibiotics and everything. That wasn't working. So my sister-in-law, Akria, rushes my brother back to Minneapolis, and then they take him to the region hospital. My brother was in pain, he's crying, he's wailing and everything. They found out that he had an infection. So they started cutting part of his leg. I always have to think, I don't think I know the difference between your foot and your leg in English, but I think I've got it right, his leg, okay. So they start cutting it. And every time they cut part of his leg, they had to keep on cutting. They had to keep on cutting. Do you know what my brother had? My brother had necrotizing fasciitis, the flesh-eating disease that affects very, 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 very few people. So they end up taking Kofi's entire right limb. Right now, he sits in a bucket. And thankfully, he had insurance, he had everything. God saved his life. But I was in such pain, I was in such anger. I used to go almost every month to go spend time with him in the hospital. And the first thing that came to my mind was, this is somebody who opens his door to everybody. This is somebody who is feeding everyone. This is someone who brings joy to people. How come God will give him the disease that affects very few people? I just couldn't understand it. That was so annoying. I was so angry. I was so disappointed. I never use a swear word. I use a swear word every once in a while. But I have to tell you, when my brother was in that hospital and in pain, I spoke to God the way I wanted God to hear me. And I said everything. I just, like, what? How can you do this to my brother? How can you give him a disease that is so rare? How do you treat somebody who is listening to you and doing what we are asking you to do, and then he gets this? So my brother eventually gets out of the hospital. I think he was in and out for about 6 or 7 months. So my brother is fine. He has his artificial leg. He has his crutches. My brother loves to dance. I've seen him dancing with his crutches and everything. So he was fine. This was 2013. Then 2 years later, my brother is healed. My brother is back to what God had wanted him to be. I left Mass. I usually don't take my phone to Mass. So I left Mass. I go to my car. And then there is a text message from my daughter. My daughter said, "Dad, come to the Mass General Hospital. I am in intensive care." I still don't know how I drove from Burlington, got on 128, or I don't even know how I got to that hospital. So I was at that hospital. I got there. They had every type of gadget that you can have on a human being. They had specialists coming from everywhere. They did everything. My daughter was so sick, she didn't make it. 3 days before Kia passed away, her liver stopped working, her kidneys stopped working, her brain started compressing. So at 4:20, March 24, 2015, that's when my daughter went home to God. So I'm sitting next to her in the hospital. I'm thinking of what happened to my brother. And then I'm saying to God, what else have you done to me? Like, why have you taken my only daughter away? Why have you taken somebody who is the most kind person, who is friends to everyone, and also somebody who loves everyone? I just couldn't deal with it. I almost told God that I've had it. This is too much. This is too much for one person to handle. So we did everything that we needed to do to send my daughter home back to God. Was I angry with God? I think I've told you 5,000 times. I was pissed off with God. I had enough, and I just couldn't deal with any more pain. But when things like this happen, I think you always have to find consolation. There are two things that I want to share. My brother didn't stop being a good person. So my brother, with his crutches and his artificial leg and everything, my brother just built a let me put this. So there are 2 toilet buildings in my hometown that my brother and his wife and his children have been able to put together for children. And I'm not bringing down my town or my country. 900 children in my hometown usually don't have enough places to go to the bathroom. So when they go to school and they go to the bathroom, what do? They go from house to house to house till they find a place to use the bathroom. But in spite of the suffering that my brother endured, he just decided, I'm not going to sit there and rot. I'm not going to sit there and let other people have the pain. My brother and his wife, they've made this possible. Consolation for Kia. Not too many areas of consolation. When you lose your child, there is no consolation. I still don't know why God stole my daughter from me. But I'll tell you, when we had a funeral, both at the wake and the funeral, we couldn't even keep track of how many people came. The funeral home had traffic. They were directing people. They were telling people to wait and come back. My daughter had such an impact on people. My daughter just loved people. My daughter goes out to the street, and before you know, there are 5 people sitting at our dining table at home. Very, very similar to my mom and everything that happens in our family. And I bring this up because here am I, very geriatric. I don't think I've had that impact that my daughter had. So that's a very, very powerful moment of consolation for me. When I look at my daughter's friends, there is no color to it. It's everybody. It's everyone. And that makes me such a very happy, even though my heart is aching. I just feel like the 25 years that my daughter spent on this earth, she was able to be very, very impactful. And that brings me consolation. And every time I look around, especially at orientation, I look at the young men and the young women, but I see my daughter in all of you. Now, when people are being silly, when people are being themselves, my daughter had this idea that every time she went to class, she needed to text me. So one day, there's this older person in her class, and every time the professor wants them to leave early, this old person will start asking questions. So Kia will send me a text, Dad, she did it again. What am I supposed to do? I'm like, you need to stay in that class and do what you're supposed to do. But things like that brings me back my memory. A lot of people will say, your daughter died almost 10 years ago. Why are you still grieving? Grieving doesn't end. And I don't think God wants us to stop grieving. The moment that I stop grieving about my daughter, I know something is wrong. I know she's no longer with me. My daughter is always with me. She's always walking with me. And I'm just going to end this talk by saying that in spite of all the many adversities in my life, when I look back when I look back at my life and my life journey, I'm very, very grateful to the Brothers of Notre Dame. If I hadn't gone to high school, to be honest with you, I wouldn't be standing here. There are about hundreds and hundreds of people in my hometown who don't have any life, and that's because they didn't have this opportunity. The other thing that I also want to say is that I'm very, very grateful to be part of Boston College. Boston College allows me to be myself. Boston College also allows me to practice my faith. Sometimes it's not just I love the church part and everything, but what I love about BC is the opportunities that I get to teach, to be with students on retreats, to travel with students all over the world, bringing joy, bringing hope, and also getting students to reflect about the impact children and other people have on them. So when my eyes are teary and my shoulders are high, I just have to remember that God has a plan for all of us. I also have to remember that as a person of faith, when I go home to God, I'm going to be reunited with my daughter. And I've been working on that. And I'm not rushing myself to death, but I can't wait to have that conversation about that old lady who was making it impossible for everybody to leave class very early. So thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I hope I've been able to share some of the things that keep me strong, some of the reasons why I do what I do, and some of the reasons why you should never give up. It doesn't matter what happens to you. It doesn't matter where life is taking you. We have this kind God who is always pushing us forward, even when we don't know where we are going. Thank you.